penultimate round of this year's South African Off-Road Championship took title contenders off the beaten track for the Caledon 400 in the Eastern Free State. With only the Roof of Africa to follow in November, it was crunch time for championship hopefuls. Marius Bahrain held a narrow lead over the Chepek father and son team in the special vehicle category. Bahrain was only too aware of just how important it was to pick up a good result on the Caledon.
Dis 'n baie belangrike wedren vir my, alhoewel daar net 2 wedrenne oor is en ek 32,5 punte voor is, dis nog nie genoeg nie. Hulle kan my nog inhaal en ek gaan dit maar rustig vat. Ek gaan van die middel na agter van die veld af begin en die manne maar van agter af inhaal. Ek wil nie weer gejaag word nie.
On the bike front, there were tight battles at the top of the 200 and 250 classes, with only a handful of points separating the top contenders in both categories. It couldn't have been tighter in both classes.
Yeah, I'm 2.5 points behind Alex. We've been having a good race all year long, and it's down to this race and the Roof. And hopefully I can beat him today, and the Roof is going to be the deciding one because he's ridden the Roof a couple of times and I've yet to go and ride there. So hopefully I can do it, try and get ahead of him on this race and get a bit of a gap between us before the Roof, and then we'll see what happens at the Roof.
Alfie Cox had a comfortable lead in the 500 class, but only 2 points separated Kevin Fisher and Grant Bloomfield in the battle for second and third. In the quad racer categories, Vickers van Deventer and Christo Fonamava were in control in the unlimited and 200 classes. After losing his unbeaten record this year on the Settler 400 in Eastern Cape, van Deventer was keen to get his championship season back on track.
Ja, my beplanning is om die wedren net te ry om klaar te maak. En ek dink om die Roof baie hard te ry. Ek moet nie nou 'n val op iets kry of 'n breek op die fiets kry nie. Ek moet net die wedren net klaar maak om die kampioenskap te wen. Dis wat al vir my baie belangrik is.
In the production vehicle category, Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak and reigning champions Abi Reiniger and Robin Houghton were the only championship contenders, with some terrific battles developing lower down the log. An interesting newcomer to the local off-road scene was the Dodge Dakota, imported from the United States, with vehicle owner Frick Mulder down to do the driving.
Ja, dit is 'n outomatiese radkas en dit is Chrysler. Die engine is 'n Dodge, 'n 6-silinder Dodge. Perkrag is in die omgewing van 300 en meer. En suspensie is Caster. Die kar voel goed, hy is baie gewillig en hy hanteer goed en hy hanteer die rof baie goed.
The Caledon 400 also saw a welcome return to action of Bloemfontein driver Theo Kutsia in a newly developed Chev 4x4.
Dit het so rukkie geneem om 'n nuwe voertuig te bou. Ons het 'n Amerikaanse onderstel ingevoer van Los Angeles af om ingebou in die voertuig. Die eerste keer wat hy nou na 'n jaar en 'n half uitgevoer raak, en ons is heel tevrede met wat ons gevoel en gesien het vandag.
For the third event in a row, Derek Pinoy, partnered by Craig Jackson in the Quickfit Raceco, found himself in pole position after setting the quickest time on the short time trial in Friday's Racing Section 1. Pinoy and Jackson were followed away by former champions Herman and Karl-Heinz Sulwald in the Raceco Eagle Buick, with Nardis Alberts and Peter Mattia following them in the Rapsa Raceco. Pinoy is no stranger to the winner's enclosure in National Championship off-road racing. With some hard charges in the top section of the field, the pace was always going to be more than brisk, and Pinoy and Jackson were looking to put some early distance between themselves and the Sulwald brothers. The Sulwalds have found success hard to come by after winning the Special Vehicle Championship in 1994, with Nardis Alberts and Peter Mattia also hoping to put an end to a lean spell that has produced some disappointing results. The Rapsa Raceco has always been quick, but reliability has been the biggest problem for Alberts and Mattia. Behind them, they have the Natal crew of Hilton Laurie, who has navigated for Derek Pinoy this season, and Derek Coombs in another Raceco. At the front of the Class B field, a terrific early battle was developing between Franz Chepek Senior and Junior and championship leader Maurice Bahrain in the Mighty Mag. For the Chepeks, the reigning Class B champions in the Epsom Raceco, the priority on the Caledon was to finish ahead of Bahrain. The priority for production vehicle championship leaders Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak was to finish ahead of the Bankman Toyota pair of Abi Reiniger and Robin Houghton. In the early stages, the Sani was caught in the middle of a string of racecos, with Reiniger and Houghton in hot pursuit in the Land Cruiser. Also making a welcome comeback and up with the leaders was Lesotho businessman Wilfred Veslau, who was sharing a race co with fellow countryman Ashley Thorne. Veslau was holding off Nick Harper and Richard Hill, who were up into the top 10 in the Rock Oil race co. At the front of the bike field in the early stages were Springbok's Alfie Cox on the AGA Panasonic Castrol KTM and Gary Peterson on the Brasco Honda. A motocross expert now competing regularly in the National Off-Road Championship and the Total Super Series Short Course Challenge. Peterson comes from a famous racing family and has quickly settled into the rigors of long-distance racing. Right behind them were Daryl Curtis on the AGA Panasonic Castrol KTM competing in the 250 category and Grant Bloomfield on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. Bloomfield set the quickest time on the Friday time trial, but had been quickly relegated to 4th place on the road. Bloomfield was being chased by Kevin Fisher on the Montage Print KTM, with no real surprises in the leading group of bikers. Behind Bloomfield and Fisher, and 6th on the road at this stage, was Elmer Simmons on a Lesotho Office Equipment Honda, with a string of riders all fighting over the top 10 positions. Included in the group behind Simmons was local favourite Graham McLaughlin on another Lesotho Office Equipment entry. With Cox leading the 500 class and Peterson the 250 category, the man out in front in the 200 category was Rion van Niekerk on the number 17 PD Motorcycles Honda. On the fringes of the top 10, Lesotho Office Equipment pair Alan Julian and Lance Trethewey were riding together and losing ground to the front runners. With pre-race favourite Vickers van Deventer hit by mechanical problems during the time trial and starting way down in 19th spot, Derek Johnson set the early pace in the quad category on the Team Yamaha Banshee. Johnson was starting to edge away from Peter Breckel, one of 3 Breckel brothers out on Brasco Yamaha Banshee. Basil Wigmore was having a good run on yet another Yamaha Banshee, but a tough route was going to turn it into a long day and a hard one for the Quad Brigade. After counting on a comfortable race that would cement his championship lead, Vickers van Deventer on the Jojo Tanks Yamaha Banshee had reverted to Plan B. This meant pulling out all the stops to carve his way through the field, and van Deventer was flying. He had already made up 9 or 10 places and had moved ahead of Christo van der Merwe on the Team Joburg Yamaha Blaster, who started in 9th position. The Caledon 400 always provides for a testing route, and it was tough going for the Quad Brigade. Handling these motorized bucking Broncos over rough terrain requires huge skill, a big chunk of bravery and superb physical fitness. A rider's weight distribution is the key factor in keeping a quad upright and pointing in the right direction. It is hard work, but some terrific midfield battles were starting to emerge with Jacques Strubit, Milton Thiessen, Johan Kruger, Colin Davies, Billy Coetzee all heavily involved. One of the closest early battles was that between Milton Thiessen and Billy Coetzee on the Polaris 400, but both of them were destined to be classified among the non-finishers. At the front of the car field, there'd been a change in running order. The Solwald brothers, Herman and Karl Heinz, had hit the front in the Raceco Eagle Buick. The Solwalds are chargers who like to dominate from the front, but their lead was a tenuous one. Nardis Alberts and Peter Mattia also prefer the aggressive approach and were right on the Solwald's heels in the Raxa Raceco. Matters up front were getting a bit tight, with Alberts and Mattia closely followed by Derek Pinoy and Craig Jackson in the Quickfit Raceco, and a flying Marius Bahrain in the Little Mighty Mag. Bahrain is another driver who likes to fight his battles from the front and moved into 3rd place when he stormed past Pinoy and Jackson. With the championship an issue between himself and the Chipek father and son combination, Bahrain was pulling away with the Chipeks quite content to play a waiting game in the Epsom Raceco. The situation at the front of the production vehicle lineup was more than interesting. Reigning champions R.P. Reinicke and Robin Houghton in the Bankford Toyota Land Cruiser were running together with Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak in the Time Fright Nissan Sani. The 2 production vehicle championship frontrunners were mixed up in a fight with the special vehicles of Natalians John Rowe and Andrew Davis and Stan Illman and Franz Stungel in a pair of Racecos. Not far behind this little battle, Wilfred Veslau was still going well in the Astoria Raceco he was sharing with Ashley Thorne, who is normally to be found in the navigator's seat. Interesting midfield battles were springing up all over the place. The Caledon was living up to its reputation for providing close and highly competitive racing. And Nick Harper and Richard Hill in the Rock Oil Raceco led a three-car train that included the Bushmaster, driven by Natal pair Leon and Johan Botma. Not far behind the trio up ahead were former production vehicle champion Cliff Barker and Malcolm Joubert, who started 19th in the 4-sticks Land Rover. Right behind them were reigning special vehicle drivers champion Greg Harvey and Boy Stone in the Queen Motor Spares Raceco. The Raceco was sounding healthy enough, but Harvey and Stone had dropped down the field and were coming under threat from Mike Redden and Wyatt Joseph in the 4-stick Land Rover Defender powered by a diesel motor. It was tough going for the car crews as well. Race cam action from the Frankenberg Yeo 4-sticks Range Rover provided an insight into the hammering crews and machinery were taking on a route that provided a mixture of the rough and the smooth. At this stage of proceedings, it also wasn't plain sailing for Gary Peterson at the front of the motorcycle field on the Brasco Honda. Peterson arrived at the final refuel with only seconds separating him from Alfie Cox on the AGA Panasonic Castrol KTM. When Darryl Curtis on the second AGA Panasonic Castrol KTM joined Peterson and Cox at the refuel, it set up what had the makings of a terrific race to the finish. The possibility of a race to the finish between three hugely talented drivers evaporated within minutes of Cox and Peterson leaving the refuel. Cox and Peterson got underway almost simultaneously, and then drama struck when Peterson crashed out of the race. Cox and Curtis lost time when they stopped to help Peterson, who had broken his collarbone, but had some leeway in Grant Bloomfield on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda, who was fourth on the road.
513.
With Peterson out of action, Alex Vowles moved into fourth place on the Antilex Dairy KTM, with Kevin Fisher hadly placed on the Montage Print KTM. Cox was still leading the 500 class, with Curtis now out in front in the 250 category. But there was a major change in the 200 class, where a flying Clayton Ensslin on the FMF Racing Kawasaki had taken over the class lead from Rian van Niekerk on the PD Motorcycles Honda. Van Niekerk was now having to play catch up. Lance Trethewey was still on the fringes of the top 10 on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda, which wasn't doing his championship hopes any good. Trethewey and teammate Alan Julian, who was in a subdued mood, had stayed in close company for most of the race. Neither Trethewey nor Julian were making any impression on the riders ahead of them and were slowly being caught by Wayne Farmer, who was third in the 200 class on a privately entered Kawasaki. Malcolm Smith was one of a string of riders trying to force their way into the top 10 and was enjoying himself so much he found time for a little showboating for the camera. Graham McLaughlin was a little more serious on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda, and a late charge saw him move into the top 10. Life is starting to get a little tough for Derek Johnson at the front of the quad racer field on the Team Yamaha Banshee. Johnson was being rapidly overhauled by Vickers van Deventer, who had simply scythed his way through into second place on the Jojo Tanks Yamaha. It was only a matter of time before van Deventer would catch Johnson, with the little dairy farmer from Lichtenberg once again in devastating form after a battle with recent injuries. Basil Wigmore was still going strong on the privately entered Yamaha Banshee, but was later to join the list of non-finishers. Behind him, Christopher van der Merwe was having a great run on the Team Joburg Yamaha Blaster. Van der Merwe had moved into the front of the 200 class and was pushing for a place in the top 3. But he had to contend with Johan Kruger, who was having a steady ride on his Arena Auto Spares Yamaha Banshee. Also destined to join the non-finishers was Paul Breckel on one of the 3 Brasco Yamaha Banshees that started the race. Brother Mark Breckel was the only one of the 3 Breckel brothers to make it to the finish, with Milton Thiessen on the privately entered Banshee, another of the unfortunates not to see out the distance. Back to the four-wheel battle, and there were changes in both the special vehicle and production vehicle classes. In the special vehicles, the brothers Solwald had taken control, and with the demise of Marius Bahrain and the Pinoy-Jackson combination, the father and son team of Franz Chepik Sr. and Jr. had moved into second in the Epsom race code. A steady drive had taken Italians John Rowe and Andrew Davis into third, where they were involved in a terrific battle with the Astoria race code now in the hands of Ashley Thorne. At the front of the production vehicle class, Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak had taken complete control in the time freight Nissan Sani. Mechanical problems sidelined reigning champions R.P. Reinecker and Robin Houghton in the Bankford Toyota Land Cruiser, and Woolridge and Vermaak were mixing it with special vehicle crews that included Nick Harper and Richard Hill in the Rockwell race code. With race distance starting to run out, there were still plenty of tight battles going on for the minor placings. While some crews were starting to run into problems and others were setting themselves up for late charges, there was plenty of action. Reigning Special Vehicle Drivers Champion Greg Harvey, partnered by Boy Stone in the Queen Motor Spares entry, was one of those who needed a late charge. Roy and Milton Slubber in an aging race car were chasing after Greg Harvey and Boy Stone, with Niels Lemmer and Carl LaRue having a great run at the front of Class E in the Toyota Hilux 4x4. A steady run in the diesel 4-sticks Land Rover Defender had taken Mike Redden and Wyatt Joseph into second place in Class E. Redden and Joseph were a couple of places down on the Slubbers, with one of the oldest race cars in the country struggling a little over sections of the course.
Stop. Good.
After stopping to help the stricken Gary Peterson, the AGA Panasonic Castrol KTM pair of Alfie Cox and Darryl Curtis decided to ride in tandem to the finish. Cox led the 500 category and Curtis the 250 class, with the pair a comfortable 4 minutes ahead of Grant Bloomfield on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. Kevin Fisher was fourth on the road on the Montage Print KTM, but would eventually be classified 6th overall behind Bloomfield, Alex Vowles and Clayton Ensign, who had done a terrific job in taking the FMF Racing Kawasaki into the lead in the 200 category. On adjusted times after the time trial and racing section 2, only 12 seconds would separate Bloomfield in 3rd place, Alex Vowles in 4th place and Ensign. Running second to Clayton Enslin in the 200 category, Leon van Niekerk had fallen 14 minutes behind, but was just over a minute ahead of 8th place Graham McLaughlin on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. Only 8 seconds separated McLaughlin and Wayne Farmer, who was 3rd in the 200 class and 9th overall. Still riding together with Lesotho Office Equipment teammate Alan Julian, championship contender Lance Trethewey just managed to sneak into the top 10 in what was a disappointing outing for the Italian. A popular win for the Solwald brothers in the special vehicle category, with the Chepex closing in on championship leader Marius Bahrain, with the title chase now going all the way to the wire at the Roof of Africa.
Ongelukkig die ander wedren niet zo goed gegaan nie, maar vir ons toe ons gekom het ons besluit dat die jaar kan ons nie meer wen nie. So dat ons gaan vir die wedrenne en ons het gegaan daarvoor. En ja, ons het die kar gehou en ons het gehou en ons is daar.
The Production Vehicle Championship will also be decided at the Roof of Africa, with Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak earning themselves a little breathing space.
Yeah, it's great. It's still got a long race to do. The Roof is the mother of all races. We've got to finish that one first before it's over.
A rare dead heat between Alfie Cox and Darryl Curtis in the motorcycle section, with KTM taking 4 of the first 6 places. Cox, Curtis and Enslin were all class winners.
We just decided to go together and finish the last 2 loops at our own pace and come in the finish line together.
It was back to the winners rostrum for Vickers van Deventer after spread eagling in the quad racer field. A good class win for Christo van der Merwe in 4th place overall, with the Roof of Africa in November next on the agenda.